You're listening to the Fitzrock Podcast, interviews where we explore the shifts and transitions of life. Here are your hosts, Keith Rock and Don Fitzsimmons. Hi, everybody. Today we are really excited to have with us Lydia Young. Lydia's training is in social work. She is the executive coach and culture strategist at Rethink Leadership Now. We're going to find out more about that. Welcome, Lydia, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Lydia, so excited to have you on today. Tell us some things about yourself.
That is a big question. So I am a mom of 2 adult children, and that is my greatest and most important role or experience in my life, is having and being a mom to 2 amazing girls that I had the privilege of knowing from the moment they were born. So that's a big one. That's a really, really important part of my life and part of my experience. Maybe another important one would be that I grew up as the child of immigrants. So my parents immigrated Ukraine to Germany to England, where my brother and I were born, and then we moved to Montreal, where we lived waiting for a visa to come to the United States. So I'm an immigrant. And really important other things in terms of my family history is that my mother was the sole survivor of a famine where she witnessed her whole family starve. And those of you that have got a therapeutic background like Dawn, that is a huge thing in terms of her lens on life and how she felt about all kinds of things, including having children, etc. So the immigrant piece and the coming to the US and feeling different too, because, we spoke Ukrainian at home. I didn't speak English till I went to school. So we were very insular. Mm-hmm. Ukrainian church, Ukrainian school on the weekends. And so, it was a bit of a different upbringing for most Americans, although I am a proud American now.
Well, what was it like for you being an immigrant child?
Well, it was A-okay in Montreal, where we lived in an immigrant ghetto where there were people from all over. So in our apartment building, there were people from China and Jamaica and Greece. And so that was pretty normal. But in the US, where we moved to a suburb of, to a small city, Rochester, New York, there were not very many immigrant kids. So it was unusual. And my mother also made a cultural error and put me in a uniform that I'd worn to school in Canada. And the very first day or 2 of school, I was moved up a grade because the Canadian schools were further ahead. So I experienced some bullying for looking and being different. And also, believe it or not, kids were not too kind to have a kid skip a grade and move from their classroom into another one. So there was the message of, it's really not okay to be smart. So I would say for most of my elementary and high school years, I did not talk at all in class. Zero me. I would read all the books. I might even read extra books, but I would never speak.
So how did you transform from that to graduating from high school and college and having a master's degree?
Right. So I met an extraordinary man when I was in college who was having these, I think back then they were called tea groups or whatever, like discussion groups or therapy, kind of deep discussion groups. And so I was intrigued and I went a few times and I didn't speak at all. And one day he spoke to me after the group and he said, I can tell that you have a lot of interesting and good ideas. And my first thought was, well, how the hell would you know? Because I have not said a word. But on another level, I knew that he could see me and that he was reading me correctly. And that pretty much broke open my whole life, because I thought, wow, number one, if he can see me, hiding is pretty useless, right? So other
Right.
people can see me. And I thought, wow, I want to learn how to do that. I want to really learn to see people in a really deep and profound way, so I could really get their essence, no matter what they were looking like on the surface.
And so you went to, like, how old were you when that happened?
Oh gosh, like after high school. So I don't know,
Okay.
18-ish, 19. And
Oh, gotcha.
that's why I then pursued a social work undergraduate degree, and later, after I, was home with my kids for a while, a master's in social work, because I really wanted to do the deep work and the deep journey with people.
So Lydia and I have a connection. When she was in grad school, I somehow was fortunate enough to become her supervisor at her practicum. We both worked at a high school helping kids who were struggling academically and socially and emotionally and all of that. And you told me before we started that was like many moons ago, and you've kind of had a lot of different shifts and transitions since then. So can you take us on that journey a little bit?
I thought, I had young kids. I thought, wow, be a school social worker, and that way I would have the same holidays, and it would kind of be a nice fit with my kids' schedule. But as you know, Dawn, school social work positions are few and far between, and there weren't any. And so somebody that I went to graduate school with was working, well, had a powerful connection at a church, and she said, oh my gosh, we could, because we knew each other from grad school, and also from having been in this incredibly intense and good supervision with a clinical supervisor from KU. So we knew each other and our perspective and our work really well. And she said, well, we can get office space and practice out of this church, which sounded great. And that was also, again, early 90s, where one of the needs of the church was that there were people being diagnosed with HIV. And it was at the time where people had no clue how the disease was transmitted. So it was the early days, and yeah, we did that group once a week for 8 years. And gratefully, the reason that we ended the group was people had good meds, and it really wasn't needed anymore, which is the best possible reason for a group to disband. But it was 8 years, and incredible people with incredible journeys and stories. So that was a tremendous honor to support people with HIV positive. And then, I did lots of clinical work, like with individuals and families and couples. And I started getting business people in my clinical practice. And the people that were coming in were not really needing therapy. It was almost like they needed to talk about and unpack their relationships with their business partners or people on their team. And I didn't know until I started working with them that I had a strategic mind. So they would say, wow, great strategies. Oh my gosh, I had never thought of that. Hey, and it really worked, or whatever. But it was coming from that deep therapeutic place of win-win. And it's kind of like, your work team is also like a family. It's like, how do you set everybody up to be able to contribute and to be heard and to build trust? And so just had more and more business people. And then I met a person who introduced me to a high-level person at a Fortune 100 company. And they'd had all kinds of trainings and all kinds of coaches, and they had an internal coaching university that was very tactical. And this woman said, oh my gosh, I have one very unique and brilliant and unusual and creative person that I would like you to work with and coach. But, we're good. We've got this whole internal university, et cetera. So we just need you for this one person. And I said, fine. And this one amazing young man was not really communicating in the way that he needed to be heard in the corporate arena. And as I got to know him and I could really see who he was and what an incredible and honorable person he was, I was able to come up with ways to help him with his mindset and his vernacular to be able to communicate well in the corporate arena. Well, he ended up not only staying, but really becoming this really profound leader. And his boss said, well, I saw what you did for him. Would you be willing to work with me? And I said, sure. So I worked with that leader and then that leader's 17 VPs. And it turned into like 10 years of awesome, amazing, phenomenal work. And then the first recession hit. And so there's good news, bad news with having one spectacular client, right? So this company was like saying, yeah, get your invoice in because as of January 1 of whatever, 2009, 2010, we're not even going to be buying paper clips. And so there was then this abyss of nothing, right? And trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? And what does my work look like? And that took some time to shift into then becoming more entrepreneurial. Even though I was an external consultant for that large company, it was one gigantic company with hundreds of people and I never had to look for work. So it was quite the education to have to market myself or to even be able to language what it was that I was doing. So I felt really competent and skilled at just walking into a situation and figuring it out and kind of allowing people to engage and collaborate. And then I had to learn the hard process of marketing myself, which is still not the easiest thing on the planet for me at all.
You probably already started this process with us, but we were going to talk a little bit about lessons you've learned in life. Do you want to give us a couple of those?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would like to go back to is, so between undergraduate school and having kids and grad school and all of that, I worked in a nursing home for 7 years. And it was so profound to watch people literally, I mean, last chapter of their life, nobody was moving on to another different life, that this was pretty much where they were going to complete their life. And I was fascinated. First of all, I fell in love with practically everybody. I never grew up with an extended family. And suddenly I had 105 people, average age of 86, that I was just fascinated by and that wanted to talk to me. So I was just constantly in these great rich dialogues with people trying to understand who they were and where they came from. And what particularly fascinated me was that it wasn't the healthiest people that were necessarily the happiest. And I thought, wow, one person is super healthy and can get around really well, and maybe they even have a really committed family, and other people that had no family, and that one woman particularly that was bedridden, that was the most bright light. You would walk into her room and she just shone. It was just like there was a sun that was just beaming out from her heart. And she was bedridden, and she had outlived her siblings, and she had outlived all 5 of her children. So I became just incredibly intrigued about what are those things that enable a person to find happiness and life satisfaction no matter what happens, like in their 3D life, like what's the internal journey. So made me recognize how important connection and relationship was. And I was pretty young then. So whatever, after getting my undergraduate degree. So it was really helped me to see the importance of deep connections and the power of love, particularly. Because I would pretty much spend all day. I felt like, I had a job to do, but but it was so wonderful to see people, and your heart just opens because you're happy to see them, and their heart opens to you because they're happy to see you. So it was an incredibly rich relational journey that taught me a lot. I also learned about listening and asking people questions. I mean, there were things that some of those elderly residents had never shared with anybody, but nobody had asked them enough caring and deep questions about their lives, that they were able to share things that were maybe even burdening them a bit, but once they shared them and could be loved and accepted anyway, there was a really powerful healing process that happened in those exchanges. And so, I think a lesson learned is, love deeply, listen. Yeah, I mean, what a gift when somebody shares something real with you that enables them to be more of themselves. And it's kind of like, this circular gift then. I think it taught me a lot about loving people and being interested and really being caring. So it was never a question just to ask a question. It was always a question that came out of a deep sense of caring and interest.
What's the happiest lesson you've ever learned?
When I was pregnant for the first time, I was 6 months pregnant and I had a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. So it's basically like you are fine, and then it's like you're shot in the head. It's like you are just leveled. It is this profound, instantaneous bam, and so I was in the hospital for about 10 days. I had to lay flat, and there was a lot of, and I was 6 months pregnant. And prior to this time, I hadn't even had a cup of coffee. I was trying so hard to be sort of this great pregnant person, to be a good vehicle for my daughter or my child. I didn't know if it was, who was coming, but, I survived those first days, which was kind of a crapshoot. And then there was a huge discussion. So the young tech docs wanted to take the fetus because they had the technology to make the fetus viable, my child. And there was another doctor that was saying, hey, if I was you, I would kind of do nothing, kind of just see what happens, which also felt a little terrifying. So the hardest lesson was really wanting to have this child and really wanting to live and not knowing what was going to happen. So I couldn't drive. I got packed up and sent to live with my parents for the rest of the pregnancy. And I had just moved to a new city. So it was just all of this lack of not my own space, not being able to drive, so no freedom, and having to also stay sort of centered and calm in case I did get to have the joy of this, of better health and having this child. So for me, the incredible gift of the very mundane thing of having a child. So, so many people have children. It is not that unusual. But for me, it was a profound gift that I never took for granted. So, just a normal day doing nothing, I really got what a tremendous treasure and gift that was. And that has stayed with me. So I so get how quickly events can turn or your health can turn, that I'm exceedingly grateful for so many things that are just normal, nothing, common. The common everyday things are really precious to me.
One of the things that really comes through in your story, Lydia, is how flexible you've been throughout your life. You had a goal back in the day to be a school social worker, and you were able to let go of that to embrace something new. And your whole story is full of that flexibility. Where do you think that came from? And is that something you think someone can develop in themselves?
I don't know where it came from because my parents were not flexible. I think yes. I think people can develop it, and I think that's where great mentoring comes into place, because like that, college counselor, that I met when I was newly in college, that could see me, that completely changed my outlook and my perspective on life. And the same has been true for me in all kinds of other ways. So when I meet somebody that can influence and impact me in a way that's really beneficial and profound, wow, I run with it, because I get what a gift that is. And I think we can. I think we can. I think the best compliment my daughters give me regularly is how grateful that they are that they never had to lie to me. So it doesn't mean that I didn't have boundaries. I had lots of boundaries, and I was very clear on my parenting journey. But there would be times when they would say, "Oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that." And I'd say, "Yes, good gut." And you're grounded anyway, right? So it would be a both and, like, yeah, you didn't listen to yourself, but you still broke the rules, and your deadline. This is it. You're not going anywhere. But having them develop their gut was huge for me. And I think that good facilitators of any kind, good therapists, good coaches, good friends, if they can reflect back to you what you're learning, you can kind of grasp it more deeply in the moment than just going through an experience and not being highly conscious of what just happened.
Tell us about something you've learned from a business perspective that was maybe the greatest lesson you've learned in business.
The greatest lesson in business is the same, I think, as in life everywhere, that trust is everything. I sometimes will have business leaders say, "Well, what's the theoretical model that you love for leadership?" And I inside am kind of doing raspberries, like, "Oh, wrong question. That is the wrong question." Because it's what's underneath the model that really counts, which is always, always, always about trust. So a leader that has high trust with his or her team or the employees, that will get them a lot further than kind of the wonderful, beautiful mission vision that is on their website or hanging on their wall that they don't really embody and live. So the biggest lesson in business is the same as the lesson in life, which is, build trust everywhere that you can, and make sure you're really focused on it where it really counts. For instance, in the business environment, if you're a business owner, or with friendships and family. Yeah, trust is everything. And then you can build on it. Without trust, no matter how gorgeous the philosophy, it's not going to be able to withstand much if the trust really isn't there. Or people go underground. So, like, I walk into businesses and I think, oh my gosh, or I facilitate a meeting and people don't really talk, and I think, wow, and they've worked there for years, but nobody really knows what the other person's really thinking. They're kind of like, putting their finger in the wind to see which way is the wind blowing and which way, what's politically correct here. And I think that is a tremendous loss in lots of businesses, also in a lot of families, where the authentic conversation, the authentic opinion is not really invited.
Our final question of the day is, what lesson are you still having to learn?
To be kind to myself, to be less judgmental of myself, and that, we don't have everything, like there are things that I'm really good at, and there are things that I'm not so good at, and to have that be okay, right? So it's just self-acceptance. And now it is easier for me to hire people to help me with things that I'm not good at, right? So people that are good at organizing and filing and, I don't know why that's so burdensome to me, but it is. But then I can have someone that come in for 2-3 hours and it's like, wow, it's gone. It's wonderful. So to stop thinking that I need to do it all on my own and get help where I need it, and ask for help when it's the truth, right? That I need some, or just some support sometimes, to just be willing to be more truthful. Like for instance, like Keith, if you were coming to my house for dinner, I would need a day to pick up before you came over. It'd be a fabulous meal, but I tend to, like it's like I have like books everywhere, and I don't notice even how many books I'm looking at one time. It's just, there's that book blindness somehow. So, and I've come to understand that about myself. So I do what I need to do to make it a great evening. But goodness, I mean, and I have a feeling that is not going to change if it hasn't changed already, right? Because I've been working on that a long time.
But that's an area so many of us struggle with. We're so much better at giving grace to others than we are ourselves sometimes. So
Definitely. Yeah. And perfection's not even that's a ridiculous goal. Even I don't believe that, that. But yes, being graceful and also valuing what I am good at, and not, having that be enough.
I love that. Lydia, we're so glad to have you with us today. Thanks for being here. How can people contact you and get a hold of you?
Well, my website is Rethink Leadership Now, and that's rethinkleadershipnow.com. And my email is Lydia, Lidia, at rethink, RETHINK, leadership, LEADERSHIP, now, NOW.com. And emailing me, contact, there's an info place on my website. If somebody forgot my email, they can reach me that way. Or they can reach me by phone as well. And my phone number is 913-681-6068.
Great. Thanks again so much for being with us. Totally honored.
Yes, this was wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fitzrock Podcast. The music you are hearing is Swim with Wild Musical Instruments by Your My Muse. Copyright 2019 and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License. Until next time, have a fantastic life.